Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
I thought I knew my wife until the day I found out my daughter wasn't mine. Turns out, I was wrong about everything. Looking back now, I realized there were signs I chose to ignore. Small things that didn't quite add up, but when you love someone, you find ways to explain away the inconsistencies. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that marriage requires trust, that questioning every little detail is no way to live. What a fool I was. My name is Warren, and this story begins about 7 years ago, though the roots go much deeper. I was married to Diane for nearly 10 years, and together we had what I believed was our daughter, Emma. At least that's what I thought until everything came crashing down. Diane was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere. She had this way about her, confident, charming, with a laugh that could make you forget your troubles. I'd met her at a company mixer when we were both in our 30s, and I knew within weeks that I wanted to spend my life with her. She was ambitious, driven, everything I admired in a person. When Emma came along 3 years into our marriage, I thought we'd built something unshakable. Emma had these piercing blue eyes, just like Diane's, and this stubborn streak that I jokingly blamed on my side of the family. From the moment the nurse placed her in my arms at the hospital, I was completely devoted to her. I worked 60-hour weeks at the advertising agency, took on extra projects, whatever it took to give her the life she deserved. Every scraped knee I bandaged, every bedtime story I read, every proud moment at her school plays. All of it felt like the most important work I'd ever done. But somewhere around Emma's 7th birthday, things started shifting. Diane became distant in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint. She'd always been social, but suddenly she was going out more often with friends I'd never met. Work trips became more frequent. She'd be on her phone constantly, but would flip it over when I walked into the room. When I'd ask about it, she'd give me that smile and tell me I was imagining things. "You're being silly, Warren," she'd say, touching my arm in that way that used to melt my worries. I'd never do anything to hurt what we have. The irony of those words still stings. The unraveling began on an ordinary Wednesday in October. Diane was supposed to pick Emma up from school, but called last minute saying she was stuck in a client meeting. I left work early and drove to Emma's school, something I'd done countless times before. When we got home, there was a certified letter waiting. It was addressed to Diane, from some legal firm I'd never heard of. Now I know what people say about opening mail that isn't yours. Under normal circumstances, I would never have considered it. But something deep in my gut told me this letter was important. My hands were actually shaking as I tore it open. The words on the page might as well have been written in a foreign language at first. Paternity test results. Biological father confirmed. But the name at the top wasn't mine. It was someone called Marcus Stevens. The document stated, in cold, clinical language, that this Marcus person was Emma's biological father. I must have read it a dozen times before the reality sank in. My daughter, the child I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, wasn't genetically mine. Someone else was her father, and apparently, Diane had known all along. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I think I just sat at the kitchen table staring at that letter, trying to make sense of it. When Diane finally came home around 8, she found me there, the letter spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. "Warren?" she said, and I could hear the caution in her voice. "What's that?" I looked up at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for a decade, and felt like I was seeing a stranger. "You tell me," I said quietly. She glanced at the letter, and I watched her face change. The mask slipped, just for a moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Relief. Not shame, not fear, but relief. Like she'd been carrying a heavy burden and had finally been caught. "I can explain," she said, but her voice was steady. Too steady for someone who'd just been confronted with such a massive deception. "Can you?" I asked. "Can you explain how my daughter isn't my daughter? How you've been lying to me for 7 years?" She sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap like we were discussing dinner plans. "Biology isn't everything, Warren. You're still her father in every way that matters." The casual way she said it made my blood boil. "Not biologically," I said. That seems to matter quite a bit, doesn't it? Who is he? This Marcus? For a moment, she hesitated. Then, someone I knew before we got married. It happened once, Warren. Just once. And I didn't know for sure until recently. Recently? You had a paternity test done and didn't tell me? I had to know, she said. For Emma's sake, for medical reasons. Even in that moment, she was still lying. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the careful way she chose her words. What aren't you telling me? She looked away. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that Emma needs both of us. This doesn't change anything. But it changed everything. I couldn't look at Emma without seeing a stranger's child. I couldn't look at Diane without seeing a liar. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house with those lies. I ended up driving until I found a motel about 50 miles away, where I spent the night staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how to live with what I'd learned. By morning, I'd made a decision that would haunt me for years. I was going to disappear. I know how that sounds. I know what it makes me. But at the time, it felt like the only way to survive. I couldn't bear to see Emma's face every day, knowing she wasn't really mine. I couldn't pretend with Diane anymore, so I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I ran. I withdrew money from our joint account, closed my personal accounts, and drove west until I found a small town in Colorado where nobody knew me. I legally changed my name to Jack Morrison, found work at a local hardware store, and tried to build a life that didn't include the family I'd lost. Or thought I'd lost. For 7 years, I lived in that town. I told people I was a widower, that I'd lost my family in an accident. It was easier than explaining the truth. I worked, paid my bills, kept to myself. Sometimes I'd think about Emma and wonder what kind of person she was becoming. Sometimes I'd wonder if Diane had told her why I left, or if she'd made up some story to explain my absence. But I never reached out. I told myself they were better off without me. That illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in May. I was restocking paint supplies when I heard a familiar voice say my old name. Warren? I turned around, and there she was. Diane looked older, more tired than I remembered, but it was definitely her. And standing next to her was Emma. No longer the 7-year-old I'd left behind, but a teenager with Diane's blue eyes and a height that suggested she'd inherited her mother's tall frame. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma stepped forward. "Dad?" she said, and that single word nearly brought me to my knees. "I'm not your father," I said quickly, too quickly. It came out harsh, defensive. "Yes, you are," Emma replied with the kind of certainty that only teenagers possess. "I don't care what some test says. You raised me. You're my dad." Diane looked like she wanted to say something, but I couldn't handle it. I turned away from both of them and busied myself with the paint cans, hoping they'd leave. They didn't. "We need to talk," Diane said. "No," I said without looking at her. "We don't. You made your choice 7 years ago. I made mine." "Warren, please," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "There are things you don't understand, things I couldn't tell you before." "I understand enough," I said. "I understand that you lied to me. I understand that Emma isn't my biological daughter. What else is there?" Emma stepped closer. "There's the part where Mom finally told me the truth about why you left. There's the part where I spent years thinking you didn't love me enough to stay. There's the part where I just want my dad back." That broke something inside me. I finally turned to look at her. Really look at her. She was beautiful, confident, everything I'd hoped she'd become. But there was sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there when she was 7. "Emma," I started, but she held up her hand. "I know what happened," she said. "Mom told me about the test, about Marcus, about all of it. But here's what I don't understand. Why did that matter more than the fact that I loved you? Why did biology matter more than the 10 years we spent together?" I didn't have an answer for that. Not one that would make sense to a teenager anyway. How do you explain that finding out your entire life is built on a lie makes you question everything? How do you tell someone that love doesn't always conquer betrayal? Diane reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is from Emma, she said. She wrote it after I finally told her the truth about why you left. All I'm asking is that you read it. I didn't want to take the letter, but Emma was looking at me with such hope that I couldn't refuse. I shoved it in my pocket and told them I had work to do. They left, but not before Emma hugged me. A quick, fierce hug that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. That night, I sat in my small apartment staring at that letter for hours before I finally opened it. Emma's handwriting was neat, careful, like she'd taken time to make sure every word was perfect. Dear Dad, it began, and just those 2 words made my chest tight. I know I'm not your biological daughter, but you're still my dad in every way that counts. You taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, scared away the monsters under my bed. Biology doesn't erase any of that. I miss you every single day, and I don't care about Marcus or DNA or any of it. I just want my father back. Please, if you can find it in your heart to forgive Mom for her mistakes, can we try to be a family again? I love you. Emma. I cried reading that letter. Really cried, for the first time since I'd left. This kid, my kid, regardless of genetics, had spent 7 years missing me while I'd been hiding from my pain. She was right. I was her father in every way that mattered, and I'd abandoned her because I couldn't handle the truth about her mother. The next morning, I called Diane's number, which she'd written on the back of the envelope. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. It's me, I said. I want to see Emma, just Emma. Of course, Diane said. When? We arranged to meet at the park where I used to take Emma when she was little. When I arrived, Emma was sitting on the same swing set where she'd spent countless afternoons as a child. She looked up when she saw me, and her face lit up with a smile that made all the years of separation feel like a terrible mistake. She ran to me and hugged me, and this time, I hugged her back. We sat on a bench and talked for hours. She told me about school, her friends, her dreams of becoming a teacher. I told her about my life in Colorado, about the job at the hardware store, about how I'd thought about her every single day. Why didn't you ever call? She asked. Because I was angry and hurt and stupid, I said. Because I let my feelings about your mother affect my relationship with you. And that was wrong. She nodded, like she understood. Are you still angry? About the lies? Yes, but not at you. Never at you. What about Mom? That was harder to answer. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I know that you deserve to have your father in your life, regardless of what happened between your mother and me. We made plans to stay in touch, to build back what we'd lost. It felt like a beginning, like maybe there was a way forward after all. But I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The past has a way of refusing to stay buried. 3 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. You're asking the right questions, but you don't have all the answers yet. Marcus wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Who could have sent this? And what secrets were they talking about? Before I could figure out how to respond, another message came through. Meet me at the diner on Pine Street tonight at 9. Come alone, and don't tell Diane. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but I couldn't ignore it. Someone out there had information about what had happened to my family, and I needed to know what it was. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. In the back corner booth sat a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked up when I approached. Warren? He said. That's me, I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. Who are you? Someone who knew Marcus, he said. Someone who knows what really happened between him and your wife. My heart started racing. What do you mean? He slid a manila folder across the table. Marcus didn't just have an affair with Diane, he said. He targeted her, her family, you. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, documents, bank statements, evidence of something much more complex than a simple affair. There were pictures of Diane with Marcus, but also pictures of someone I recognized, Diane's sister, Cindy. I don't understand, I said. Marcus and Cindy were partners, the man explained. This whole thing, the affair, the pregnancy, the lies, it was all planned. Cindy had gambling debts, money problems. Marcus had a thing for married women and their families. They worked together to tear your life apart. The room started spinning. Cindy had been at our wedding, at Emma's birthday parties, at every major family event. She'd been the one I'd confided in when I was worried about Diane's behavior. She'd been the one who'd encouraged me to trust my wife, to not be paranoid. Why? I asked. Money, partly. Marcus was paying her for information about your family, your finances. But there was more to it than that. Cindy was jealous of Diane's life, your marriage. She wanted to destroy what you had. I flipped through the documents, seeing evidence of payments from Marcus to Cindy, emails between them discussing their plans. There were even recordings, audio files of conversations where Cindy coached Marcus on how to manipulate Diane, how to make her feel trapped. Is Diane part of this? I asked. The man shook his head. Not initially. Marcus seduced her, got her pregnant, then used the baby to control her. When she tried to come clean to you, Cindy convinced her that you'd leave if you knew the truth. They kept her scared and isolated for years. I thought about Diane's behavior after Emma was born. The secrecy, the phone calls, the way she always seemed on edge. I'd attributed it to stress, to adjusting to motherhood. But now I realized she'd been living in fear. Where's Marcus now? I asked. Dead, the man said bluntly. Car accident 2 years ago, but Cindy's still around, still pretending to be the supportive sister. I closed the folder, my mind reeling. Why are you telling me this? Because Marcus was my brother, he said. And because what he did to your family was wrong. Cindy needs to face consequences for her part in it. He stood up to leave, then paused. There's one more thing, he said. The paternity test you found? The one that said Marcus was Emma's father? It was fake. Cindy forged it. Emma has always been your daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. All these years, all the pain, all the time I'd lost with Emma. It had all been based on a lie. Emma was mine. She'd always been mine. I sat in that diner for another hour, trying to process what I'd learned. Finally, I called Diane. We need to talk, I said when she answered. About Cindy, about everything. There was a long pause. You know, she said quietly. I know some of it. I want to hear the rest from you. We met at her house the next evening. Emma was at a friend's place, so it was just the two of us. Diane looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her secrets had been crushing her for years. Tell me about Marcus, I said. She took a deep breath. I met him at a conference. He was charming, persistent. I was going through a rough patch with work, feeling overwhelmed with everything at home. He made me feel special, appreciated. So you had an affair. One night, she said. Just one. And I regretted it immediately. I tried to cut all contact with him, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept calling, showing up places. Then I found out I was pregnant. And you thought Emma was his. He convinced me she was. He said the timing was right, that she looked like him. I was terrified, Warren. Terrified of losing you, losing our life together. But you could have gotten a real paternity test. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I tried, but every time I made an appointment, Cindy would talk me out of it. She said it was better not to know for sure, that it would only cause more problems. Cindy, I said, and Diane's face crumpled. I trusted her, Diane whispered. She's my sister. When Marcus started pressuring me, threatening to tell you about the affair, Cindy said she'd help me handle it. She said we could manage the situation without you ever finding out. By lying to me for years. By protecting our family, Diane said desperately. Or at least, that's what she told me it was. But Warren, I swear to you, I had no idea about the fake test. I didn't know she was working with Marcus. I thought she was trying to help me. I wanted to believe her, and maybe part of me did. Diane had always been trusting to a fault, especially when it came to family. It wasn't hard to imagine Cindy taking advantage of that trust. "What about when Marcus died?" I asked. "Cindy told me it was finally over," Diane said. "She said we could put it all behind us and move forward. She's the one who encouraged me to find you, to try to rebuild our family." That made sense too. With Marcus gone, Cindy would have wanted to clean up the mess before anyone started asking questions. Bringing me back into the picture would make everything look normal again. "I need to see the evidence," I told Diane. "Everything you have from that time period." She nodded and led me to her home office, where she pulled out a box of documents. Bank statements, emails, letters, all the paper trail of those difficult years. As I went through them, I could see the pattern of manipulation. Small withdrawals that Diane had attributed to regular expenses. Phone records showing frequent calls between Diane and Cindy during the worst periods. Even some of the emails Diane had sent to Marcus begging him to leave her alone. The more I read, the clearer it became that Diane had been as much a victim as I had. She'd been manipulated by two people she trusted, her sister and a man who'd preyed on her vulnerabilities. That didn't excuse the lies, but it helped me understand them. "What do we do now?" Diane asked. "We tell Emma the truth," I said. "All of it. And then we figure out how to deal with Cindy." The conversation with Emma was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Sitting in Diane's living room with both of us trying to explain years of deception and manipulation to a teenager who'd already been through too much. But Emma handled it better than I'd expected. Maybe even better than I did. "So, I am your biological daughter?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You always were." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "And Aunt Cindy was part of all the lies?" Diane nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I trusted her, and she used that trust to hurt all of us." Emma looked at me. "Are you going to forgive Mom?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with since learning the truth. "I think so," I said carefully. "It's going to take time, but yes, I think I can forgive her." "And us? Can we be a family again?" I looked at this remarkable young woman, my daughter, my flesh and blood, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. "If you want that," I said. "If you're willing to give me another chance." She smiled through her tears. "I've been waiting for that chance for 7 years." But even as we were trying to rebuild, I knew we weren't finished with the past. Cindy was still out there, still pretending to be the loving sister and devoted aunt. She'd destroyed our family once, and as long as she was in our lives, I couldn't trust that she wouldn't try again. I made the decision to confront her myself. I drove to her apartment the next weekend, unannounced. When she opened the door, her face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, and finally, resignation. "Warren," she said, "I wondered when you'd show up." "Did you?" I pushed past her into the apartment. "Then you probably know why I'm here." She closed the door and turned to face me. There was no point in pretending anymore, and we both knew it. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough," I said. "I know about Marcus. I know about the fake paternity test. I know about the money and the manipulation and all of it." She sat down heavily on her couch, suddenly looking much older than her 45 years. "I suppose you think I'm some kind of monster." "I think you destroyed my family for money and jealousy," I said. "What would you call that?" "Survival," she said quietly. "You have no idea what it's like, Warren, watching your sister have everything you've ever wanted. The husband, the child, the perfect life. Do you know how that feels? So you decided to take it away from her?" "I decided to level the playing field," she said. "And yes, I needed the money, but it wasn't just about that." "What was it about then?" She looked at me with something that might have been pity. "It was about showing you who Diane really was. She had an affair, Warren. That part was real. She cheated on you and then lied about it for years. I just helped the truth along a little. By faking a paternity test? By manipulating her into staying silent? By making sure she faced consequences for her choices, Cindy said. Something she never would have done on her own. The cold calculation in her voice made me sick. This woman had watched our family fall apart, had watched me walk away from my daughter, and felt justified in all of it. Emma is my biological daughter, I said. She always was. You stole 7 years of her childhood from me based on a lie. For the first time, Cindy looked genuinely upset. I didn't know you'd leave, she said. I thought you'd stay and fight for your marriage. I thought it would make you both stronger. You thought wrong. Yes, she said quietly. I did. I called the police from her apartment. The evidence Marcus's brother had given me, combined with the documents from Diane, was enough to press charges for fraud and extortion. Cindy didn't resist arrest. I think she was tired of carrying the secret. The legal proceedings took months. During that time, Diane and I went to counseling both together and separately. We had to rebuild trust that had been shattered not just by lies, but by years of separation and hurt. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible. Emma was our anchor through all of it. She had every right to be angry with both of us, with Diane for the deception, with me for abandoning her. But she chose forgiveness instead. She chose to focus on building the future rather than dwelling on the past. We lost 7 years, she told us one evening as we sat together in Diane's living room. Let's not lose any more. Cindy was eventually sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution for the money she'd taken from Marcus. It felt like justice, but it didn't erase the damage she'd done. The scars from those years would take much longer to heal than any legal proceeding. Diane and I didn't get back together romantically. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. But we learned to be partners in raising Emma, to put our daughter's needs ahead of our own pain. We learned to forgive, if not forget. I moved back from Colorado, found a job in town, got an apartment close enough to be involved in Emma's daily life, but far enough to give everyone space. We had dinner together once a week, attended her school events as a family, celebrated holidays and birthdays together. It wasn't the life any of us had planned, but it was honest. It was real. Emma graduated high school with honors and got accepted to 3 different colleges. At her graduation ceremony, as I watched her walk across the stage, I thought about all the moments I'd missed, all the years I'd lost. But I also thought about the years ahead, the woman she was becoming, the relationship we'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd of families and gave me a hug that lasted a long time. Thank you, she whispered in my ear. For what? For coming back. For fighting for us. I hugged her tighter, this remarkable young woman who had somehow found it in her heart to forgive her imperfect parents. Thank you for giving me the chance. Now 3 years later, Emma is in her sophomore year of college, studying education just like she'd planned. She calls me twice a week and comes home for holidays and school breaks. Diane and I have found our rhythm as co-parents and, slowly, as friends. The romantic love we once shared is gone, replaced by something different but no less important: mutual respect and shared dedication to our daughter. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run away all those years ago. If I'd stayed and fought through the lies, demanded the truth, refused to let Cindy's manipulation destroy us. Would we have been stronger as a family? Would Emma have been spared the pain of thinking her father had abandoned her? But then I remember what Emma told me once. Maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to. Maybe you needed to leave so you could choose to come back. She might be right. Maybe the man who left 7 years ago wasn't strong enough to handle the truth. Maybe I needed those years in Colorado to figure out who I was without the lies, without the family I thought I'd known. Maybe I needed to lose everything to understand what really mattered. I'm not the same person I was when I opened that letter about Marcus. I'm not the same man who packed a bag and drove away from his family in the middle of the night. I'm older, more careful about trust, but also more appreciative of the relationships I do have. I know now that families aren't defined by biology or perfection. They're defined by choice. The choice to stay, to fight, to forgive, to rebuild. Emma chose to call me Dad even when she thought we weren't related by blood. Diane chose to tell me the truth even when it could have meant losing me forever. I chose to come back even when staying away would have been easier. These aren't the choices that make for fairy tale endings. They're messier than that, more complicated. But they're real choices made by real people trying to find their way back to each other. And maybe that's worth more than any perfect story ever could be. The anonymous messenger who'd helped me uncover the truth never contacted me again after that night in the diner. I never learned his real name or why he'd chosen to help me. But sometimes I think about him, Marcus's brother, carrying the weight of his family's crimes, trying to set things right in the only way he knew how. We all carry our secrets, our guilt, our mistakes. The difference is what we choose to do with them. Some people, like Cindy, use their pain as an excuse to hurt others. Some people, like me, run away from it. And some people, like Diane and Emma, find the courage to face it head-on and try to make things right. I can't change the past. I can't give Emma back those 7 years when she wondered why her father didn't love her enough to stay. I can't undo the lies that Cindy and Marcus built our lives around. But I can choose, every single day, to be the father Emma deserves. I can choose to be present, honest, and committed to the family we're building together. That choice, that daily commitment to showing up, that's what makes someone a father. Not biology, not perfection, not the absence of mistakes. Just the willingness to keep trying, to keep loving, to keep fighting for the people who matter most. Emma was right all along. I was her father in every way that counted, long before any DNA test could confirm it. And she was my daughter from the moment I held her in my arms, regardless of whose genetic code she carried. The lies couldn't change that. The years of separation couldn't erase it. Even my own doubts and failures couldn't destroy it. Love isn't a lie, even when it's built on one. Truth isn't always what we think it is, but it has a way of surfacing eventually. And real family isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to imperfect together, to forgive each other's failures, and to keep choosing each other even when it's hard. 7 years ago, I thought my family was destroyed by betrayal and lies. Today, I know it was actually saved by truth and choice. Emma chose to forgive me. Diane chose to face her mistakes. And I chose to come home. Sometimes that's all it takes to rebuild a life. The willingness to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, presence over perfection. It's not the ending I'd planned when I first held Emma as a baby, but it's the one we've earned together. And that makes it beautiful in a way that any fairy tale never could be.